Details galore for the American action movie Crank follow below. When the Chinese triads win your heart, what do you do? It's totally absurd. The second Crank will explain the procedure. So, Chef Chelsea Boss falls out of a helicopter and lands in the middle of a busy intersection. Some criminals then pick them up off the ground and haul them away. Trevor wakes up in a makeshift hospital with doctors removing his heart and a red container containing his natural heart being passed to Johnny Vang. Chevy wakes up later and realizes that he is being used for body parts after two men casually suggest they might take some. Just give it a day or two. We all know that Jeff Keelios is a total badass, but what you might not know is that his artificial heart makes him even more powerful and driven. After quickly dispatching the two men, he discovers that he is being supplied by an external battery pack. The building he runs into next looks like a cross between a brothel and a gang hideout. He disables several security guards outside the building and then physically interrogates a thug to learn Johnny Vang's whereabouts. The goon eventually gave in and revealed that Johnny Vang was last seen at the Cypress Social Club. As fast as that, you hotwire a nearby car. However, he begins to feel weak and discovers the external battery pack is still attached to a chair. He then figures out how to contact Doc Miles, who explains that an Evercore artificial heart has been implanted in his chest. Absolutely, no worries. Miles tells Chip that the device has an internal battery and, once the external power pack is depleted, he has 60 minutes before it shuts off. Miles emphasizes that he needs a real heart, preferably his own, as soon as possible because the artificial one won't last very long. Chip hears this and immediately accelerates his car through the asphalt as more criminals chase after it. While driving his stolen vehicle, Chevy encounters a group of men who are clearly impressed. When it seems that Chevy has given in to the idea of a race, they talk and try to entice him to join in. He loses control of his car and crashes, shattering the backup battery. Then, Chip tells his newfound automobile pals to connect jumper cables to him so he can recharge his own battery. Why settle for such a small sacrifice? Confused and hesitant at first, but now eager to find out what happens, they give in. Then Chevy shows up to the social club, where he is met by the unexpected reappearance of Back. Please subscribe and enable notifications before we continue in the same vein as the video suggests. A social club prostitute on the hunt for Vang. He evaluates every person from the building but loses Vang, who exits the club just in time to escape from a visible, angry Chevy. Chevrolet picks up Rhea, who now has undying gratitude for Jeff for saving her life, and is about to abandon her in its search for Vang when the latter unexpectedly reveals that Rhea has information about Vang's whereabouts. Rio then takes him to the strip joint where Vang claims to have been attacked by Chico's goons. They appear to be club owners who are curious about what Vang has stashed away in his safe. Chico tries to win Vang over by demonstrating his affinity for Japanese culture and convincing him to hand over the box and its contents. Even more impressively, he offers to prepare sushi for Vang. The sushi, it turns out, is made from people's elbows. Because of his awe, Vang has decided to strike a deal with Chico. In the meantime, Jeff tracks down Eve, who is now performing as a club dancer. In the room where Vang and Chico were discussing the terms of their new contract, Chevy bursts in with a thug to announce his presence. Chip tries to break up a fight brewing between Rhea, his newfound mistress, and Eve, his longtime lover. But as he tries to calm them down and explain the situation to both of them, the argument escalates. Chico walks in and has a confrontation with Jeff. He relays the information that Shiv must be brought in alive to the rest of the gang. The club is in shambles after a shootout between the two sides. Although Jeff emerges victorious from the gunfight, Vang escapes. Now, as a result of what happened at the club, Jeff knows that the Mafia has dubbed him El Huron, the Ferret, and plans to have him killed. However, he does not know why. His attempted retaliation right as they're getting ready to leave the bar. Eve uses a glass jar to knock Rhea out, and Jeff follows her out of the building. The police arrive and attempt an immediate arrest. The situation looks very sticky for Jeff as what looks to be 7 cops have him surrounded and begin beating him to the ground. By yelling and screaming, Eve is able to divert the attention of the police and buy Jeff some time. As a result of the diversion, Chip is able to easily overcome the police and escape in a police car. In the car, Chevy and Eve are making good time. Eve describes watching a video online of a man who survived a fall of 14,000 feet from a helicopter. As a result, he is still alive. As she fills him in on the latest happenings in their peculiar world, she also complains that he hasn't contacted her in 3 months. Suddenly, Kevin's car was joined by the club's red-headed stripper, who had arrived in the car before Kevin. Eve sneaks in, sits down next to Eve, and introduces herself by making sexual contact with her. Even the stripper can't get enough of Eve's flesh. Eve isn't in the mood, but she tries to get it on with her anyway while they're in the back seat. Meanwhile, Jeff has apparently found a battery charger, as he continues to electrocute himself with a taser that he stole from the police during their fight. Later, Chip says that he needs to track down Vang. "Since your passing, I have seen many changes." The stripper recognized the name and let him know that Vang has been known to frequent the Hollywood racetrack whenever he needs to relax. The next thing you know, she's removing her handcuffs and tries once more to learn more about Eve's body. After Eve sees the stripper get out of her handcuffs, she begs her to do the same for her. The stripper also doesn't think twice about setting her free in the hopes that this act of kindness will prompt Eve to start making out with her. Unfortunately, her hopes are dashed when Eve knocks her out as soon as the handcuffs are removed. Using Eve's phone, the two from the club talk to the doctor, where Miles reveals that he can accommodate Chevy's hardback if he can obtain it from Vang. While on their way to the Hollywood racetrack, the trio encountered a group of protesters, and the doctor explains how and why he lost his license as a heart surgeon and why Chip is still alive despite having destroyed his battery pack. We don't know what this means, but the demonstrators seem to be workers who haven't been paid and are demanding payment. Okay, let's move on. The police will look the other way while one of the hookers hits the windshield with her breast. Jeff meets Venus, the brother of Chip's late partner Carlo Carrillo, and helps Chevy get away from the police on their way to the track. Venus also explains that he can wreck his entire body while riding the bike. Chevy also lets Venus know that El Huron had a hand in killing his brother in exchange for help. He loses control of the motorcycle because of Venus's health condition, and they both end up in a ditch. At the racetrack, Jeff's energy levels begin to drop again, but a call to Duke Miles reveals that rubbing against another person's skin generates static electricity, which charges Jeff's internal battery when he gets hurt. Eve arrives at the Hollywood racetrack just in time to rescue Chevy from a tense encounter with the police and a frail old lady. Thankfully, she understands the situation after Chevy explains it to her. As a result of the tension created by their intimate encounter in the middle of the racetrack, he feels a surge of adrenaline. When Chevy spots Vang in the crowd, he leaves the naked Eve behind to go after her. The crowd is more pleased with the show that they put on than the actual race. But Vang gets away from Chevy again, only this time it's by the skin of his teeth. Security is about to make an arrest on Chevy. Ignorant, Kim rides up in a stretch limo and saves Jeff. How about entering? Pum Dong, a major leader of the Triads, needs a heart transplant and has chosen Chevy's heart to replace his. Pum Dong chose Chevy because he has the strongest heart, having survived the Chinese poison in the first film. Don Kim elaborates on the significance of El Huron to the story as well. Don Kim stops Chen from leaving and reveals his plan to reward Pum Dong with Chip. Chevy defeats Don Kim's limo, riding goons, known as Chicken, in a brutal gunfight. Chevy gets out of the limo after the fight and recharges to what you could possibly be operating at full capacity at a nearby transformer. He speeds off in his car to continue his search for Vang. Meanwhile, at El Huron's base camp, Chico, who narrowly avoided being killed by Chevy, provides a first-person account of the events. He was extremely fortunate to have made it through Chevy's vicious assault on his gang. El Huron is visibly livid by the tale, and Chico ends by removing both his nipples at El Huron's behest. Eve's ex-lover Randy tries to persuade her to turn herself in or go on the run with him after she escapes from the racetrack. When Randy tries to hit her, he is not in the mood for an act and knocks him out. Unfortunately, she was quickly captured by law enforcement. While he's on the phone, Venus watches as they take her into custody. The next thing we know, Venus has called Orlando for assistance in leaving for Australia. "Please assist me." So, Orlando agrees, and he and Orlando plan to meet somewhere while looking for Vang. A new battery pack for Chevy's artificial heart has him hopping in an ambulance. Outside, he runs into Johnny Vang. He then exits the ambulance, prompting a foot chase and subsequent gun battle. This time, Jeff subdues Vang only to find out that his heart isn't in the box with Vang on the floor. 3 weeks ago, Jeff's heart was transplanted, which he learned when he called the doctor. Miles assures them that Pudong's chest is home to his healthy, beating heart. Put your mind at ease. I was able to recruit random bystanders. Vang claims that just as Chevy is about to land the killing blow on him, a gunshot rings out, revealing that Doc has a plan, but Chevy would rather do things his way. Suddenly, Chico appears with the gun that shot Vang in his hand, while one of Chico's goons uses a blunt weapon to knock Vang out. The next scene opens on a beating heart inside a human chest, and the owner of this chest is Pudong, who seems very pleased with his new heart. As he walks through a red light district, he is so elated that he begins to dance to the rhythm of his heart. He then sees Dark Chocolate, Doc Miles' secretary, and she and Doc Miles vanish inside a building. All right, maybe. Yeah. Next scene, we see a young Chevy Julius and his mother as guests on a talk show. The show's host and listeners. Young Chevy had a rough upbringing. It seems he was a very disruptive child who committed several offenses. The host probes for insight into his peculiar behavior. Meanwhile, Chevy is brought back to the present as the show takes a commercial break. Awakening to find himself being taken by Chico and his men to Catalina Island, where Luron waits for them, was a rude awakening indeed. In Orlando, Venus and Rhea are reunited, and the trio set out to track down Jeff. Meanwhile, the police are questioning Eve about Jeff's whereabouts, but she posts bail and is freed. Consequently, in Catalina, before bringing Chevy to El Huron, Chico and his men torture him severely. He learns that El Huron is the brother of Ricky and Alex Verona, both who were brutally murdered by Jeff. As a word of caution, neither is the case. Luron then proceeds to demonstrate to Chev Ricky's severed head floating in a box of fluid while explaining that Ricky's head is being kept alive through artificial means. Not indefinitely, but long enough for him to observe. As a group, we murdered Jeff. El now proceeds to beat the back of Kelios, but he is soon interrupted by the arrival of Orlando, Venus, and Rhea. After Venus shoots Huron in the arm to start a gunfight, the majority of Luron soldiers are killed in the crossfire. After Chevy makes an attempt to strangle Huron, Chico breaks it up with a fistfight. In the end, he overpowers Chico and fatally stabbed him with a fluorescent bulb. Venus tries to pursue El Huron, but the latter's men stop him and he has to use his nunchucks to defeat them. Back at Doc's place, PWN Dog is put to sleep with a syringe after being lured into the room by Dark Chocolate. Jeff returns to the island and discovers Ricky's head is no longer in the box. Before he kicks it into a nearby water fountain, he says a few final words. After seeing this, El Huron becomes enraged and makes his way towards Jeff with the intent of shooting him. Jeff feels his strength ebbing and drops to his knees. Right before El Huron fires his gun, Venus gives him a shove, and they both fall down the stairs while fighting. Venus has bought Jeff some time, so he climbs an electrical pole. Tries to charge himself by clutching a pair of live wire but is burned by the enormous current. He comes back energized and kills El Huron with a series of punches. In his confusion, he misidentifies Rhea as Eve and kisses her, accidentally setting her on fire. The film ends with Trevor Blaze walking up to the camera and giving the middle finger to the spectators. During the closing credits, Eve watches as Doc Miles transplants a new heart into Jeff. He should hopefully be able to open his eyes and his heart rate should return to normal. Not the best conclusion, but considering everything else about this film, we're not surprised. Venus is probably hidden away somewhere, ready to be rolled out whenever a third installment of this film is filmed. This concludes my review of Crank High Voltage, a film by Lionsgate Films starring Jason Statham as Jeff Kelly, Amy Smart as Eve Leyden, Clifton Collins Jr. as Jesus Lure on Verona, and others. Mark Neveldine and Brian Taylor followed up their 2006 film Crank with the 2010 sequel Crank High Voltage. When we meet again to evaluate, take care. Your attention is appreciated.